Hi, everybody. This is Isaac, and this is a, a series of conversations that I'm going to be having with friends of mine and amazing people during the continued pandemic. And today's topic is going to be about mental health, which I know is on a lot of people's minds. I'm joined today by my good friend Elizabeth Cobb, and she's going to help talk to us about how to recognize some mental health things while you're at home, isolated, and some ways to sort of work within them while we're all living in this new normal. So, thank you, Elizabeth. Why don't you tell everybody more
Yeah,
about yourself?
great. Yeah, thanks, Isaac. So I'm Elizabeth, like Isaac said. I am a therapist here in Charlottesville with the Women's Initiative. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and work primarily with folks who have experienced trauma. So that's sort of my day to day. And yeah, it's been a crazy time, I think, for everybody. And so I'm grateful, Isaac, that you're thinking about this. I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds. It's a lot to deal with right now.
Yeah, so I kind of want to just ask some very basic questions and get your responses. So
Okay, sounds
right
good.
now, the things that I've heard people mention and name that they might be
Mm-hmm.
struggling with are things like anxiety or depression. Can you tell us what exactly are those things and how might you be able to tell if you've never thought about mental health or if you know your mental health really well?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what might be some signs that you're struggling with, someone might be struggling with anxiety or depression during self isolation?
Yeah, gosh, what a great question. So to start with, I would say that I want to just say to everyone that things are different right now. We all kind of have our ways of dealing with stress, and even if you're really good at that and that's something you're really thoughtful about, things are upside down right now. And so I imagine everyone or almost everyone is having increased stress, probably worrying a lot, probably feeling kind of sad, maybe even crying more frequently than usual, kind of those signs we might otherwise say look like depression or anxiety. But to answer your question a little bit more directly, so in the mental health field, when we're talking about depression, we're talking about someone having a a decreased mood, so like more sadness, feeling down a lot of the time. And we also notice things like people's changing. For some people, that's eating a lot. For some people, that's not having any appetite at all. And same thing with sleep. Sometimes you just want to sleep all day long and you can't get up and you're really, really tired. And sometimes you can't get to sleep at all and you're having insomnia. And so those are sort of the big things, the mood, the appetite, and sleep that we look for. And also then sort of those things like thoughts of death, ideas about, it not being worth it, not wanting to go on, being overwhelmed, those sorts of ideas. So when that comes to how things are going right now, a lot of that is going to be part of what people are feeling right now. Hopefully not to the extreme of thinking about harming themselves, but definitely thinking about, worrying about friends and family and themselves and what their lives are going to look like. Maybe you're losing a job you love, or you're worried about how you're going to pay rent. Those are all things that can kind of cause feelings of depression anyway, and insomnia. So I want to emphasize that it's normal to be feeling a lot of that. And it's important to know when it's beyond what you can deal with yourself or you want to deal with yourself, right? So I'm kind of going off into depression and not really getting to anxiety. So sorry, I'll try to swing back that way, Isaac. But yeah, so when it comes to, well, maybe I shouldn't go that far. Sorry. Maybe I should, oh gosh. Should I go back
You're
to,
totally fine. No, why
I'm
don't
hoping
you?
you're editing at this point.
I'm leaving then. Um, so I think that's a really helpful way to talk about depression, both like that there's a aspects of it that are just going to be normal because the
Yeah.
situation isn't normal. But also that there is a tipping point, and for every person it might be different,
Yeah.
um, but it's something where once we know what the symptoms are, then you can start to say, okay, is it something that I can seek, do some practices for to help manage. But before we get to there, I want to ask it. So talking about anxiety, is it the
Mhm.
same? Is it different? Are those things that, how might anxiety, be different or similar to what you just said about
Yeah.
depression?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good lead in. So anxiety is definitely similar, and anxiety and depression are often really hard to tease apart. A lot of the time, we feel them together, or we feel some combination, or one causes the other. So it's with those labels. I think they're helpful when they're helpful, meaning you don't have to know exactly what it is to realize you want some help. But anxiety is typically intense worry. So it might be worrying about things to the point where it's keeping you up at night, or you can't get to sleep, or you just can't stop thinking about things. Like the same thought might be coming over and over, and you feel like you need to do something about it, and you don't know what. So that's often, that's kind of when anxiety is bad, that's often what it looks like, and can cause people to feel, some people will have sort of things like they'll start to kind of like scratch at their skin, or pull on their hair, things that start to feel really destructive and can even be kind of scary. You're like, what's going on? Why am I doing this? And those can all kind of be because of anxiety. Yeah.
And is there a way that, depression, I think that it can have, it feels like some of the things you described are like more sustained throughout a day, but it's
Hmm.
also possible, like, could anxiety bring on something like a panic attack, or is that something different?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, it's, we can label them differently. You can have panic attacks because of anxiety. You can have a panic disorder, right? So all those can be different labels, but they're all on the same sort of spectrum of things that can really worry us. And I'm glad you brought that up, because those are symptoms. Panic attacks often are things that people don't recognize as easily. Um, it's something that people often go to the emergency room with. They're having heart palpitations, or they feel like they can't breathe. They're getting really sweaty all of a sudden, or their temperature's kind of all over the place, dysregulated. That can be anxiety. And it's really scary when it happens, which is why people go to the emergency room, because they don't know what's going on, and they think, like, oh my gosh, I'm dying, what's happening? And it's anxiety that's causing it. And it
Hmm.
takes kind of, slowing down and figuring out what's happening, sometimes over the course of some time, to be able to get that under control. But it's possible.
Sure. So I think that, you know, like we said, there are a broad spectrum of things that we just described. There's
Mhm.
also, I imagine, a pretty broad spectrum of ways to, I mean, maybe you can even help me out with this, Elizabeth, because
Yeah.
I'm kind of struggling to choose the right word, because
Yeah.
I almost said to combat these symptoms, but I don't think that's quite the right thing. What
Yeah.
word would you use when it comes to what our response is when we feel these things? Is it
Mhm.
management? Is it, because it doesn't feel like there's an easy solution. So
Right. Right.
what sort of
Yeah.
mindset should we have?
Yeah. I think care is the word I would come up with. So how do you care for depression? How do you care
Mm,
for anxiety and care for yourself if you're having any of these symptoms? Um, and you know, I will say they can be really overwhelming, and they can be really hard to seek help for, right? Often we don't know where that line is. We don't know, okay, when is it, this, for instance, right now, this massive thing is happening. Everyone's really stressed out. No one knows what to happen. When does it shift from that to, oh, I need to seek some help for this because I'm really struggling, right? Um, and I want to say that the line is where you need it to be, right? So if you feel like things are really hard to handle, and you just are having a really tough time, even if you feel like other people around you are having a hard time, and they're working through it without help. If you need some help, get some help. You know, it really is something that, as much as we can just care for ourselves when we're having these kind of symptoms, the easier it is to deal with it, rather than judging yourself, rather than saying, I shouldn't be feeling this way, or comparing yourself to others. You know, as much as you can just say, I want to take care of myself in this, you know, the easier it is to do it.
Yeah, I love that way of framing it because it allows you to be gentle with yourself. I think a lot of us are fighting expectations that we feel around what we're doing with our time in isolation,
Absolutely.
and like struggling with the expectations about new things at work, or caring for other people. We have a lot of people at Wesley who are caregivers, and so you know that to be reminded to care for yourself as well in these, if you're feeling these things. I think it's just a way to kind of be gentle with yourself, and despite all the things that are going on around us.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the metaphor of, if you've ever been, I know you have flown, but for folks, if you've been on an airplane and they tell you you have to put your oxygen mask on first,
Mm-hmm.
that's a really important thing for caregivers to remember. You have to, you know, if you're not taking care of yourself, then you're not able to care for others anymore. And we caregivers have to remind ourselves of that. It's really, it is an act of caring for others to care for ourselves.
Yeah. Wow. Can't say that enough. So what does that care look like?
Yeah, great question. So again, this is an area where I think we have a spectrum, right? I think all of us need to be thinking about how we deal with stress right now, because I can't imagine there's anyone out there that's not feeling increased stress through this COVID crisis. So when I think about that, I think, you know, we're all doing this whole isolation, social distancing. Things have changed. Our habits have been disrupted. And so I think it's really important for us to think about what we were doing before that helped, and figure out how to keep doing it and do it more, you know? So if exercise is really important to you and you used to go to the gym, how can you figure out a way to exercise at home, or, you know, go outside, take walks, whatever. If you like to cook, you know, can you try new recipes with the maybe simple ingredients that you have at home? Those might seem like silly examples, but you know, it would be really easy for us to get away from the things that we do to care for ourselves, because things are upside down, is disrupted right now. And I think what we need to do instead is really dial down and be super thoughtful about taking time to take care of ourselves, knowing that our, you know, as much as our stress increases, the things we do to deal with stress need to increase as well. And then have, you know, compassion for ourselves too, right? We're all probably going to have moments where we're super irritable, or we are just tired, or we are overwhelmed, or beyond what our normal maybe capacity might be. Like we aren't able to function at the same level. So, you know, ways that, you know, I think the best thing you can do in those moments is care for yourself and say, what do I need? Maybe I just need to slow down. Maybe I need to rest. So I think it's good to be really thoughtful about those things, as well as kind of the ways that you take care of your body, you know, making sure that you're eating, sleeping, you know, exercising, again, drinking water, all that kind of stuff. Those are really important parts of dealing with stress. And then when you feel like that's not enough, I think that's when we have to think about what else do you need, right? Connection is super, super important right now. Self-isolation, social distancing, these are things that make us feel really disconnected. And maybe, you know, you're not able to talk to the people you usually talk to, or you're not able to get that in-person contact. I think we need to be thinking about ways to reach out and stay connected to others, because that is something that helps us deal with stress and isolation, right? So those are sort of, again, like the kind of standard, everybody I think needs this right now. And then if you're feeling like it's too much, or your stress, your whatever it is, if you're having depression, anxiety is more than you can deal with by yourself, that's when it's a really good time to think about what kind of professional help you could get. And I want to reassure folks that therapists, if you've ever considered counseling, you might think, hey, this isn't the best time to start it. Actually, we're still up and running. Like the Women's Initiative has gone to telehealth, that where I work, but also the other agencies in town are doing the same thing. Everyone I'm talking to that's a therapist, private practice, group practice, everything, folks are now doing, video sessions, phone sessions. And as someone who was really not interested in that, it's gone a lot better than I thought, and it still can feel really, really helpful. So you can reach out and find a therapist right now, just as you would be able to, even if you can't go into the office physically. There are also lots of great resources for online support, or helplines where you can call and talk to someone and have them help you think through what you need and how to get it. So there's kind of just like the basic stuff you could be doing, and then the stuff that you can do with professional help.
Great. And I think you said that you had some specific, some of those hotline things, like what are the names
Yes.
of them that we can share with folks?
Yes, absolutely. Charlottesville has done a great job actually of putting together some resources. So there is a website called Help Happens Here that was created around the time of August 12th, 2017. And they've now kind of repurposed it. It's been in existence all along, but they've repurposed it specifically for this. And there's if you go to helphappenshere.org/coronavirus, that is a really great hub for all kinds of resources, both, this is some nice tips about, how to take care of yourself now, healthy habits, taking breaks, having a plan, staying connected, good stuff anyway. But then if you go down from that page, the website I just gave you, Isaac, it has a list of mental health resources, as well as other community resources for financial help, food assistance, all that kind of stuff. They're doing a good job of kind of keeping everything new that's being created in that one place. So I've found that really helpful and easy to navigate once you get there.
Great. And we'll put a link to that in the video description when you're watching this, so that you can just
Fabulous.
right below the window, click on it if you want to seek that out. Elizabeth, I know that probably the people who are watching this have, like I said, a range of experiences with mental health, and even maybe a range of assumptions about it. So I wonder if in a faith setting, there may be some people who are skeptical about mental health, or may not know where the line could be drawn between spiritual practices as ways for dealing or helping cope with mental health, and ways that those things might not be the same as what a therapist could offer. So could you just talk about any thoughts you have about that, or advice you have when it comes to people who might be feeling like their faith isn't helping them cope with this as much as they need, and or people who feel like only faith should be helping us cope? It's a complicated range.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great question, and we could probably talk for a few hours about that, so I'll try not to. The first thing I will say is that, if you're someone who relies on faith to get you through a crisis, that's what you've done in the past, or maybe that's what you've been told you need to do, and you're still feeling stress, or you're still feeling, down about this, I want to tell you that that's not a failure, right? Like, first and foremost, not being able to get everything you need from prayer or meditation, or whatever kind of practices you use to as part of your spiritual life, if that's not enough to keep you okay, that's not a failure. That's being human. We just need other people to help us through things sometimes, and we as therapists, this is what we do, right? It's our job to help people, especially when they're feeling stuck. And I think that happens a lot with people who maybe have really strong faith or really strong spiritual practices. A lot of times something happens and the resources you have just don't quite work the same way anymore. and you need to be able to adjust, and it can be really helpful to have someone help you do that. And that doesn't mean you're, abandoning your faith or your spiritual practice, or that, God's not enough. It's that you've got to figure out it. I mean, you can lean on other people and get help that way, and still be able, and then have a stronger faith or a stronger spiritual life through that, by being able to not have to, walk alone in a human way.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
I'm not able to give good spiritual advice, and in the way you would be, or from the same level, but that's what I would say to that, simply.
well, I think the other thing is that it's not a sign that there's something lacking in your spiritual life in this time, like that it's not a sign of God abandoning anyone, or,
Yeah.
I think that sometimes we can feel like, well, um, it can be another way of making ourselves, putting pressure on ourselves, and kind of feeling inadequate, or like, there's some
Absolutely.
sort of level of spirituality you're supposed to hit where even in the face of a crisis you can
Yeah.
respond like this totally zen warrior monk. But that is,
Yeah.
I think the Psalms here are a pretty good antidote to that, because it shows so many different emotions, the full gamut of both
Yeah.
anxiety and fear, and deep sorrow and longing.
Right.
And I think that that's a good place for people maybe to find permission, if you need it, to let your emotions just be what they are before God in a spiritual practice, or before a therapist in a session.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Elizabeth, this has been really helpful. I want to thank you, and
Yeah.
everybody, thanks for watching this. I will make sure to put the link to the website in the video description. And as always, know that anyone on staff at Wesley is here for you, and ready to talk and help guide you in the direction of professional help if you need it, or just to connect with you one-on-one if that's what you need to. Any last word, Elizabeth?
Hang in there, everybody. That would be the first thing I'd say. Thanks, Isaac. It's great to connect with you. And yeah, I really hope we can all continue to have compassion for ourselves and for each other in this.
Thank you so much. I will see everybody next week. Thanks, Elizabeth, for joining us.
Thanks, Isaac. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.